Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayet Nashta Prayeshvabhadrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. We're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 11, Lord Krishna's entrance into Dvaraka. Tam upashrutya ninadam jagad bhaya avaham prati udyayu pragya sarva bhartri darshana lalasaha tamupashrutya ninadam jagadbhaya bhayavaham pratyudyayu pragja sarva bhartri darshana lalasaha tam, that upashrutya, having overheard, ninadam, sound, jagad bhaya, the fear of material existence, bhaya avaham, the threatening principle, prati, towards, udyayu, rapidly proceeded, praja, the citizens, sarvaha, all, bhartri, the protector, darshana, audience, lalasaha, having so desired. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. The citizens of Dvaraka, having heard that sound which threatens fear personified in the material world, began to run towards him fast, just to have a long desired audience with the Lord, who is the protector of all devotees. Purport. As already explained, the citizens of Dvaraka who lived at the same time of Lord Krishna's presence, there were all liberated souls who descended there along with the Lord as entourage. All were very anxious to have an audience with the Lord, although because of spiritual contact they were never separated from the Lord. Just as the gopis at Vrindavana used to think of Krishna while he was away from the village for cowherding engagement, the citizens of Dvaraka were all immersed in thoughts of the Lord while he was away from Dvaraka to attend the battle of Kurukshetra. Some distinguished fiction writer in Bengal concluded that the Krishna of Vrindavana and that of Mathura and that of Dvaraka were different personalities. Historically, there is no truth in this conclusion. The Krishna of Kurukshetra and the Krishna of Dvaraka are one and the same personality. The citizens of Dwaraka were thus in a state of melancholy due to the Lord's absence from the transcendental city, as much as we are put in state of melancholy at night because of the absence of the sun. The sound heralded by Lord Krishna was something like heralding the sunrise in the morning. So all the citizens of Dwaraka awoke from the state of slumber because of the sunrise of Krishna, and they all hastened toward him just to have an audience. The devotees of the Lord know no one else as protector. The sound of the Lord is identical with the Lord. As we have tried to explain by the non-dual position of the Lord, the material existence of our present status is full of fear. Out of the four problems of material existence, namely the food problem, the shelter problem, the fear problem, and the mating problem, the fear problem gives us more troubles than the others. We are always fearful due to our ignorance of the next problem. The whole material existence is full of problems, and thus the fear problem is always prominent. This is due to our association with the illusory energy of the Lord, known as Maya or external energy. Yet all fear is vanished as soon as there is a sound of the Lord represented by His holy name, as it was sounded by Lord Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the following 16 words. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We can take advantage of these sounds and be free from all threatening problems of material existence. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Tamopashrutya ninadam jagadbhaya bhayavaham pratyudhyayu prajah sarva bhartrir darshana lalasaha. The citizens of Dwaraka, having heard the sound which threatens the fear personified in the material world, began to run towards him fast, just to have a long-desired audience with the Lord, who is the protector of all devotees. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhescha Kripa Sindhubheva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yantah pravishya mama vachi mama prasuktam sanjeevaya tekila shakti darak svadam nanyam shahasta charana shravana tvagadim pranam namo bhagavate purushaya. Hare Krishna. So, we read today in this verse how by hearing the sound of Krishna's conch shell, the inhabitants of Dwaraka starts running to him as if they came back to life. It will be said later that the experience of separation with the Lord is tantamount of being dead. In fact, every living entity in this material world, being forgetful of the Lord, being separated from the Lord since time immemorial, is practically dead. And the more we are separated, the more we are losing the contact with this original spirit, which is the source of our very existence, the more we become like dead matter. Our identification with the matter is nothing but more or less the statement of the affairs. We are matter. We have forgotten our source, spiritual source, and therefore we have become matter. And matter is dead. Consciousness is alive because it has life, by definition. This matter is dead, and it's somewhat revived by the presence of the spirit soul, but ultimately, because we are totally identifying ourselves with the matter, we are the same as dead. And Krishna consciousness is actually the process of reviving our true nature. Like in Bible, in New Testament, it is described that Lord Jesus Christ was resurrected, came back to life. And that event is symbolic to any spiritual process or any spiritual awakening, because we are being resurrected by the spiritual practice. We are coming back to life from our half-dead, semi-conscious or practically unconscious condition, or our misidentification. And it is said very interestingly and very pointedly in this verse what is the impetus for this revival. The impetus for this revival is fear. Srila Prabhupada very beautifully explains that the problem of fear is the most prominent problem in this material world. There are 4 basic pillars of life which are similar to the human beings and to the animals. Ahara bhaya, nidra, maithunam cha. These 4 problems of life, the sleep, the food, ahara, bhaya, the fear of existence, fear of death, and nidra, sleep, and maithunam, the mating problem, the sex problem, they're common between the human beings and animals. But Srila Prabhupada says that among these problems, you can solve the problem of food, no problem. Especially nowadays, plenty of chemical fertilizers are there, therefore a lot of chemical food is available, no problem. So food is not such a big problem. Mating, in Kali Yuga, not a problem at all. Plenty of it. Sex is freely available in this time. Sleeping, not a problem. A lot of buildings, a lot of skyscrapers is there. Fear is still the problem. And Prabhupada very beautifully explains what is this nature of this fear in this material world. He says, we are fearful because we don't know what will be the next problem which we will encounter. The stream of problems is endless, and the fear is always there, the anxiety is always there, because we don't know what will be the next problem. Because this world is such an unpredictable place. The only thing which can be predicted with surety about this world is that there will be problems. And we all know that there will be problems. For sure there will be problems. We just don't know what kind of problems will be there. And that's why we are always fearful and anxious and don't know what's going to happen with us. And ultimately, as it is explained by in Srimad Bhagavatam, that the fear arises because of the misidentification. Bhayam dvitiya Abhinivesa taksiyat. It is very clearly said that the fear, the very root cause of fear, the very root of fear is dvitiya Abhinivesa. Abhinivesa means absorption, and dvitiya means secondary. The primary principle of creation, the very basis of creation is spirit. Matter is secondary. But because we're being so much absorbed in this material existence, in the existence of this body, in the matter, because of this, the fear arises. Bhayam dvitiya Abhinivesa taksyat. Ishada petasya viparya smriti. But this absorption in the matter has its cause. The absorption in the matter is not the original cause of our problems. The absorption of the matter is secondary problem, because the original problem is eshat apetasya. We turned away from the Lord. And as soon as we turn away our consciousness from the Lord, as soon as we became disengaged in relationship with Him and disengaged our consciousness from Him and turned away from Him, Ishada Petasya, then Bhayam Dvitiya Abhinivesa Taksya, then our consciousness, even though it's spiritual by nature, by the very nature, the nature of consciousness is spiritual, it has become absorbed in this dead matter. Bhayam Dvitiya Abhinivesa Taksya Ishada Petasya Viparyayo Smriti. And as a result of this, Viparyaya Asmriti, we have become forgetful about our real nature. We are being reminded again and again and again, your spirit soul, you're not this body. But it's a good theory. But somehow or other, we don't really remember that I'm spirit soul. We are so used to be identified with the body, so used to identify with this flesh that this notion or this theory, this concept that I am not this body is very hard to believe. We don't have the experience. And that's called asmriti, the forgetfulness. Forgetfulness of material existence, which puts us into this forgetfulness of our spiritual, real spiritual nature, eternal spiritual nature. This Ishada Petasya Viparyayo Smriti, it's basically when you turn away from the Lord, the two aspects of Maya start acting upon us. When the spirit soul turns away from the Lord, there is this avaranatmika Maya. First is avaranatmika Maya. The spirit soul, the consciousness of the spirit soul is being covered by matter. Avarana means covering. So the consciousness becomes perverted. This perversion of the consciousness is called viparyaya. It's perverted consciousness. We all, unfortunately, have this perversion. Our consciousness is not really straight. It's not really in contact with itself. It's perverted. And then prakshepatmika Maya, this is the second aspect of Maya, or illusory energy of the Lord. This covered consciousness is being projected into matter, and we start identifying with the matter. These two mechanisms are there to divert our attentions, or to direct our attentions towards the matter, and make us completely absorbed, enslaved by matter. That's the mechanism which is described in Srimad Bhagavatam itself, and we have to be very clear about this mechanism. We are, unfortunately, in a very precarious state of existence. Our existence is very precarious, and therefore, being so much absorbed in the matter, we're always fearful. Prahlad Maharaj says this to his father, Hiranyakashipu. He says, what is this verse? Tat Suravarya Dehina, Sadasamudvigna Dhiyo Asad Graha. He says that because you my dear father, who is the best of the demons, because you asadgraha. Asadgraha literally means you grabbed, you're holding asat. Asat, something unreal. And that's unfortunately, the situation of every living entity in this world. We're just holding for this untruth, unreality, something which is very temporary. We're trying to hold it by all means. We don't want to give it up. We don't want to give up identification with the body. Sometimes we think that when we become old, it will be easier for us to get rid of this identification with the body. Not really so. I knew one 90-year-old woman who was begging her doctor, please give me a few more days in this completely useless body. The body is, by 90 years, the body is good for nothing. Still, because of this asadgraha, because of our, clinging to this material existence, it's very difficult for us to give up. And Prahlad Maharaj explains what is the result of it. Sadasamudvigna dhiyo asadgraha. Because our intelligence, our buddhi is so much absorbed in this asat, in this unreality, sadasumudvigna. We're always disturbed. The disturbance is always there because that's the nature of matter. Matter is always in the state of turmoil, in the state of disturbance. And because we're absorbed, our consciousness is absorbed in this nature which is very unsteady. We're also unsteady and we're also in the state of anxiety. So much, it is said that Srila Prabhupada uses this word melancholy, that when you are separated with the Lord, you are in the state of melancholy. Melancholy, it's an ancient word for depression. Melancholy is coming from Greek word which means the black bile. According to the ancient Greek medicine, the state of depression comes from some humor of the body which is called black bile. It basically means when you are totally depressed, when you are down, you cannot really get any pleasure from your existence. It's amazing, our existence, our very nature of existence is pleasurable because the soul by nature is Satchitananda. But being absorbed in this matter, we become depressed. This depression is the constant state of affairs. According to the World Health Organization, it is the most acute epidemics of the world at present. Everyone is depressed, more or less. Everyone is more or less depressed. Everyone is more or less down. Everyone is more or less, except for a few people who live in Bhutan. They say that in Bhutan people are still happy. The rest of the world people are very unhappy, depressed. Why? Ultimately because of this reason. Because the consciousness is so much absorbed in this matter. And therefore, there are billions of dollars people spend every year for buying antidepressants. This is huge business. Pharmaceutical business is one of the most lucrative businesses in the world because all these chemicals, they cost nothing and they're being sold for a very high price. And people, they're just getting all these antidepressants because they're so depressed, so desperate. But here in this verse, the real recipe for getting rid of depression is being described. Because it is said very clearly that Jagat Bhaya Bhayavaham, that Jagat Bhaya, the fear personified, the fear of this matter, Jagat, Jagat is also very interesting. The world is called Jagat. Why is it called Jagat? Because it's in a constant flux. It's constantly moving. Nothing is permanent here. And therefore, Jagat Bhaya. Therefore, this world is so fearful, so full of fear, because it's so unpredictable. It's so unsteady and such impermanent place, and therefore it causes suffering. But it is said, Jagat Bhaya Bhayavaham, that this fear, this world, this fear which is concomitant with this world, which is basically is the nature of this world, Bhayavaham, it is being fearful of the sound of Krishna. Tamupashrutya ninadam. Ninadam. It's also a very interesting Sanskrit word. Nada means sound. Ninadam means transcendental sound. Special sound. Nitaram nadam. Which is a very special, very deep sound. So it is said here, Tamupashrutya ninadam jagat bhaya bhayavaham. When the inhabitants of Dwaraka, they heard this sound which is being feared by this fear personified, they became running towards the Lord as if attracted by the magnet. It's also a very significant statement because, as I said in the beginning, the impetus for practicing spiritual life, the general impetus for practicing spiritual life, the common impetus for practicing spiritual life is fear. Why this world is created by God, why God created such a fearful place? Only for this one reason, to help us to come back to Him. Because wherever we are, we feel that we are not at home, that something is wrong. Shakespeare said that something is rotten in this Danish kingdom. And this statement that something is rotten here, it's basically the statement for the whole material world. Something is rotten here, something is rotting. The smell is bad. The smell of death is all-pervading in this material world. And therefore, because driven by fear, living entities in this material world, they're being attracted towards the Lord. They're running. As it is said here, the inhabitants of Dwaraka, they were running Bhartri Darshana Lalasaha, because they were so eager to get the darshan of Bhartri, of the protector. This feeling of insecurity which is there in everyone's soul in this material world is the impetus ultimately. It's ultimately good because it helps us to run in the right direction. Otherwise, we would be still rotting in this material world, being an illusion that we are happy. And it's also very interesting because we know that fear is the impetus for Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. Fear, according to Srila Rupa Goswami, is the impetus for us to follow regulative principles. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he explains that Dwaraka represents Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. We have these two big realms and basically two sections of Krishna's pastimes. Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan and Krishna's pastimes in Dwaraka. And there is a very stark difference between the two because the pastimes in Vrindavan are very spontaneous, very, anxiety-free. But pastimes in Dwaraka, they are much more, what shall we say, for the lack of better word, they're quite violent. There is a lot of fighting there, Kurukshetra war, this, that. And of course, the queens of Vrindavan, queens of Dwaraka, 16,000, they're also there. But it's all mixed with heroic activities of Krishna. And therefore, Prabhupada says that one famous fiction writer in Bengal, he even went that far that he said that there are completely different personalities, that Krishna in Vrindavan and Krishna in Dwaraka are different. Prabhupada says it's not so, it's factually not so, but in one sense it is so because the personality is different. Even Rupa Goswami says that it's a different, Krishna in Dwaraka is in one sense different from Krishna in Vrindavan because the mood is different. It's the same person, but in a different mood. So the mood in Dwaraka the background of this mood is still fear. When we are engaged in a spiritual practice, being driven by fear, we are practicing Vaidya sadhana bhakti, which is good, but it's not the highest. Ultimately, the ultimate result of our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam should be a completely different impetus for spiritual practice. Not to practice to get rid of anxiety, not to practice to become less fearful than we are, but to practice because that's natural, because that's spontaneous. Srila Prabhupada calls this spontaneous devotional service. There is a devotional service which is regulated. You do it because you have to do it. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. But if this Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare doesn't become Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, different Hare Krishna. If the mood doesn't change, if you're still doing it because you have to do it, because otherwise, like in some temples, if people don't come for lecture, they are not given the breakfast. You know, if this is the still impetus, something is wrong. Ultimately, and this is very clear according to the structure or design of Srimad Bhagavatam, this fearful condition should subside, and the understanding that we are already under the shelter of Krishna should come. Srila Prabhupada says that ultimately, on a spiritual level, we are never separated with the Lord. We are separated only by our consciousness, by the consciousness which is covered by this illusory energy. That's why we feel that we are separated. But the result of us chanting the holy name should be the feeling that we're not separated from Him. And Prabhupada, he of course says that as much as the fear, as much as the sound of Krishna's conchal was non-different from Krishna himself, the sound of the holy name is non-different from Krishna himself. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And if we chant properly, with the proper mood, then ultimately the nature of our consciousness will be changed, will be transformed. The example is given by Srila Rupa Goswami himself when he says that when you put iron into the fire, that after some time being in the fire, iron accepts or adopts the qualities of the fire. It's not iron anymore, it's a fire. Even though it's still iron, but it becomes fire, it becomes transformed. And in the similar way, when we chant again and again and again, that's why it is said it is explained in Vedanta Sutra, the question is being raised, why do we have to repeat spiritual practices? Why do we have to do it again and again and again? Is it not tedious to do it Hare Krishna, and again Hare Krishna, and again Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna? So why it's not enough to just say Hare Krishna and that's it, done? So in Vedanta Sutra it is very clearly explained that the reason is our fallen condition, because it's not enough for us. The reason is that when we chant, because we chant imperfectly, because we're still engaging our imperfect consciousness into this perfect process. And because the consciousness is imperfect, the process, even though it's perfect in itself, also becomes somewhat faulty. Not as effective, not faulty really, but not as effective as it is in reality. And that's why again and again and again and again we should repeat Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, till the transformation takes place. And when the transformation in our consciousness takes place, then the attraction towards the Lord will become spontaneous, rather than driven by the fear which is existent in this material world. So ultimately we should come to this platform of spontaneous attraction by understanding that Krishna and his holy name are not different from each other. But to come to this platform, we have to be reminded again and again and again. When we start chanting, we have to remind ourselves, Krishna and holy name are not different. Because now we don't have this experience. We do not understand that Krishna and the holy name are not different. For us, it's just yet another material sound. But if we remind ourselves, that's Krishna. That's my way. That's my only way to come in contact with God. That's my only way to change the faulty nature of my consciousness, which is being now at this moment absorbed in matter. Then only the holy name will act. If we don't do this, we will continue chanting in a very inattentive and offensive manner. And this offensive chanting will be effective, but not so soon. Shigram, not shigram, not very soon it will come. It is said in this verse of Padma Purana, Tachet deha dravina janata pashanda madhye. Tachet deha dravina janata pashanda madhye. Nikshiptam syan naphala janakam shigram evatra vipra. The result, naphala janakam, the result will not be born soon if you chant still being absorbed in matter. Tachet deha dravina janata pashanda. Pashandata means this atheism, atheistic consciousness. And if we chant in this atheistic consciousness for the sake of the body, for the sake of the facilities of this material world, for the sake of your relatives and everyone else, if you chant with this motivation, Tachet deha dravina janata pashanda, in this pashandic, atheistic state of consciousness, nikshiptam syan naphala janaka, shigrame vipra, the holy name will act on you, no doubt about it. But it will be a very slow process. Nikshiptam syan naphala janaka, the fall, the result of this will not come very soon. Therefore, basically, the very important lesson of this verse is that we have to understand that sound of Krishna and Krishna himself are not different. And we should feel attraction, understanding that the sound of Krishna's holy name can give me the protection of fear, from fear. And we should run towards this holy name. Once Prabhupada, there was a very interesting incident. Bhavananda Prabhu is remembering this incident. Prabhupada was sitting in the veranda of a lotus building in Mayapur. And he looked at his disciples and he said, all my disciples were sent to me by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada to help me in this mission. And Bhavananda Prabhu started saying, Prabhupada, but we are from meat-eating background. we are so fallen. How we can be, sent to you by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. And Prabhupada gave a very important answer. He said, this is all superficial. It's not so significant where you were born. Of course, we were born in a certain not very sattvic condition, and being born in this conditioning, we were eating meat, this and that. Prabhupada said, but when you heard the sound of holy name, you came running. And that's why, that's the sign. Because we had some attraction to the sound of the holy name, that's the sign that there is, some connection which is there between us as the soul and the Supreme Lord is still there. So the main point, again, of this verse is that we have to be attracted to the sound of the holy name. And even if this attraction is not yet there, we have to remind ourselves that it's not different from the Lord. And ultimately, like again, Srila Rupa Goswami gives the example that ultimately when our tongue is covered by the bile, Srila Prabhupada uses this word melancholy in the purport, which means the imbalance in this bile. And Srila Rupa Goswami uses the same example. He says, when you have this jaundice, when the bile is imbalanced, then your taste buds are not functioning properly, and therefore the sweet things taste bitter to you. The holy name is sweet. There is some sweetness in the holy name. It's just because we are sick, we are diseased, we cannot feel the taste of the holy name. But again, Srila Rupa Goswami gives the same advice to us, that we should repeat it again and again and again, as if it's a prescription of the Ayurvedic physician. The Ayurvedic physician, to somebody who has jaundice, prescribes to take some sweet things to cool down the bile. In the same way, we are being prescribed by Srila Prabhupada and all our acharyas, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as Srila Prabhupada says, as it's sounded by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we are being prescribed to get rid of this disease, to chant holy name again and again and again, with the understanding, with the complete, clear understanding that the holy name is not different from the Lord. Then only we will be able to chant properly, and then ultimately the spontaneous attraction will be developed as much as it is testified here by the inhabitants of Dwaraka who are running towards the Lord. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Maybe is there any question?
Yes, please tell us about the Russian preaching. I have a friend in Manhattan who's from the Republic of Georgia, and his wife is from Moscow. And I just need to, if he hasn't been over here in quite some time, I need to be able to give him some stories about his wife's country or his country that will get him over here and let him hear the holy name.
What's his name from Georgia? He's a devotee?
No, he's not a devotee.
He's not a devotee. Some stories. Well, Putin still doesn't come to our temple. That much I can say. At least he's not very regular. So, but there is a lot of other people who come. Usually, sometimes in Moscow we have this big Sunday feast program, and around 2,000 people come for this big program, and this 2,000 people come for Sunday feast program. It's not every Sunday because we have a small rented place. If we had this place, probably people would come every Sunday. We have a small place in the city but when we rent a special hall once a month, then around 2,000 people come for this program. When the first preachers from the West came to Russia, what struck them the most is that at that time, there was no facilities at all. There were some little apartments somewhere downtown or anywhere. And sometimes 60 people would be packed in this really small room. So much so that they couldn't sit. They would stand. 60 people stand. And sometimes they would stand for 3-4 hours, listening the lecture of some preacher. And Niranjan Maharaj, he always says to me, that was really an experience for me in itself. People are standing, listening Srimad Bhagavatam class for 3 hours, being packed in this room. Why? Probably because, as it is explained here, the atmosphere there is quite full of fear. So, as we heard from this verse, fear is a good impetus to come to Krishna consciousness. Fear means basically uncertainty, unpredictfulness, which is there, and so on and so forth. So, I don't know what else can I say. It's a very interesting country. It's very good country.
2,000 people? Are you kidding me? That's a lot of people.
Yeah, I also think so. It's a lot of people. And very few of them are Indians. That's another feature of Russian preaching. Hardly any, because there is not many Indians living there. They're all natives.
When we had our Manhattan temple, we had about 200, more than 200 devotees were living in that book. Something like 220, maybe 230. And therefore, it was Mangalarti was you had to get your space. That's great. We never had any 2,000 people.
Well, I didn't say that 2,000 people are living in one building. Yeah, but we have in Moscow we have probably 150 brahmacharis or something like this. No, it's in 3 ashrams. There are 3 ashrams. It's probably around this range. Yes?
600 devotees were waiting for Prabhupada when Prabhupada came to first Rath Yatra in 1976. They were all cheering up, they were going nuts. So 600 devotees in that building. And they wanted Prabhupada to stay more time. Prabhupada was sick and he was still in London. I was wondering, there are plenty of food to eat, plenty of clothes to wear, all over the world. So, as you were talking about, there is life to enjoy, life to live. But do you think, and then still you are saying if they are unhappy, but do you think we are chanting Hare Krishna and immediately we are happy? So we are trying to become them.
No. I said no. Sometimes we become more miserable when we start chanting Hare Krishna. That also happens. Because people kind of, when they come to Krishna consciousness movement, they lose their ability to enjoy the material world and still didn't obtain the ability to be happy in the spiritual world or in spiritual realm, so to speak. So it's sometimes a difficult period or a transition period, but therefore we need some patience and some humility. Actually, this state in this verse, Trinadapi Sunchina Taror Ivasa Hishnuna Manina Kirtaniya Sadahari, these two qualities of patience and humility are being developed in the beginning stages of devotional service, exactly because from the very beginning, yes, devotional service gives some joyful experience immediately, but then after some time it becomes a little difficult, and therefore we have to be very patient and steady and try to go through all these difficulties. So it's also there, this phase is there. But then ultimately you develop these qualities of humility and patience, and then Kirtaniya Sadahari, the experience of always being in contact with the holy name will give you ultimately very profound happiness and joy.
That means when we come to that stage of happiness, then we can become people that you are, we are.
This is how yesterday Hansarupa Prabhu explained that in the beginning you get some, when you get the credit card, you have this, complimentary period of 30 days where you can just use but not pay anything. Huh? Grace period, yeah, grace period. So in the beginning we get some grace period and then it becomes a little difficult. But if you understand the philosophy, read Prabhupada's books, it's not so difficult actually. It's quite okay. You wanted to ask that?
You were explaining about Dvaraka and Vrindavan was out of fear and then just out of natural
Spontaneous.
So is it a question of conscious effort, or we have to wait for significant purification?
No, it's not a question of conscious efforts. You cannot become spontaneous by efforts. By the very definition, if you're making efforts, you're not spontaneous. So by efforts, you let me become spontaneous. No, spontaneity doesn't come by effort. Spontaneity comes by association. It is said that the spontaneous devotional service, the cause for spontaneous devotional service is actually sadhu sangha. Then only it becomes spontaneous. And of course, purification has to take place too. Because in reality, the eligibility for this spontaneous devotional service is the platform of ruchi. And you have to come to the platform of ruchi by some endeavors, but also because of this association, because of sadhu sangha. Okay, thank you very much. Shri Radha Govinda Dev Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaura Premananda.